This is Crosscut Reports. I'm Maleeha Syed. Today, we're looking at the culture war brewing in schools around Washington.
The largest school district in Washington state is offering gender treatments to students at no cost.
Across the country, parents are pushing back on school curricula and policies that pertain to people of color and LGBTQ+ communities. Some of this conflict has trickled into Washington, where educators and union leaders say they're feeling burnt out by the clashes happening in public forums and online. Crosscut state politics reporter Joseph O'Sullivan talked to some of these educators about what they're hearing from the public, their experiences being targeted by community members, and how these encounters are affecting them at a time when the field is already dealing with a labor shortage. I would be curious to know a little bit about the Edmond School District board meeting. Were you there in person in July?
No, I wasn't there for that meeting, but these sort of interactions have been playing out in the Edmond School District, I think for more than a year now, with people, showing up and questioning how the school is treating transgender individuals, or in this recent meeting, raising the question is, well, you're building a new student health center. Are you going to give gender-affirming medications there and stuff?
What are people afraid of when they're hearing about these medications?
I mean, first of all, we spoke to the school board president, Nancy Kadam. She says, no, we're not distributing gender-affirming medication or anything out of the new forthcoming student health center. But we've had probably for the last few years here sort of, concern rise, especially on the right, about gender identity and how that's sort of being welcomed into parts of society a little more than it used to be, or officially recognized more than it used to be. And so these things are starting to pop up kind of along those lines, and not just with something like question about, are they giving out medications in school, but sort of other issues too, laws that's being passed in the legislature, or even just more vocal resistance against Pride Month, as we're seeing.
Where did parents get the idea that this was happening? Was it just the news that a new health center was opening, or did they have any reason to think that these medications were even going to be distributed to students?
Well, it's hard to say. We live in an era now where sort of things circulate around on the internet and people get hyped up, and maybe you see some news about things happening in another state or another school district, even within Washington, and then people, show up with their questions or their worries. And of course, people aren't very trustworthy of our institutions as much. This is happening right after we just went through the pandemic, and school boards and schools especially, you had the schools closed down for a while. It caused a lot of consternation. Around that time is when we talked to Nancy Kadams and others. They say, this is when sort of opposition in school boards, people started showing up to, protest school lockdowns and to protest mask orders for the children. And so that regular thing started happening a few years ago with people showing up and trying to put pressure on educators. And this is sort of almost sort of a new iteration of it, or that's what some people say.
You had mentioned, I think, at the top of your story that these are issues, confrontations that have been happening for the past year or so. Was that in reference to this particular school district, or is this happening in other schools around Washington, these sort of conflicts that are coming up?
Yeah, I think what people are saying is that down here in Olympia, there's a, concerned parent group, and they're, sort of digging around, doing public records requests, or you'll have a teacher or a student in a school district that hears something they don't like about maybe a gender curriculum, or they don't like a policy or the way it's being played out. And so they go back to sort of project that concern. They go to school board meetings, they're emailing teachers saying, hey, what are you doing in the schools and stuff? And the people that we spoke to say, that we just didn't see that as much 15 years ago or 20 years ago. I mean, you might have a little controversy here or there, but sort of this sustained thing, right? These political polarizations are sort of so deep in the fabric now of our society that in some cases it's pitting students against other students, teachers against other teachers, and some parents against school districts and teachers.
And taking a step back, because these issues seem to be reflective of what's happening on the national stage, what are some of the issues that parents and the public are upset about when it comes to the curricula and policies that they fear students are being exposed to? What are some of the issues they're taking up at the national level?
Well, the national level, it's a little bit everywhere. It's a little bit different everywhere. I mean, you've got conservative states that are putting restrictions on what teachers can teach, what books are allowed to be read to students or accessed by students.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed several new education laws that he says empower parents.
Floridians want our school system to be about educating kids, not indoctrinating kids.
Those things aren't playing out in Washington State for the most part. We've got a sort of a progressive sphere of elected officials, and Democrats control the legislature and the governor's office, so they're not doing that stuff at the state level. And so here in Washington, it's playing out more at the local level.
I was wondering if you were surprised to see some of the issues come in to Washington. I mean, I'd imagine that there would be some echoes of what we're seeing nationally happening in Washington, but like you mentioned, it's a progressive state. And some of the places that you referenced in your story feel like fairly progressive areas. So I wonder if you were surprised at all to see some of these issues taking place at these school board meetings and online.
Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, for the reason you mentioned, I mean, this wouldn't be surprising in Florida necessarily or South Dakota or something. But, when we get to, especially Western Washington, right, you think it's a very progressive place. But there's, very deep divisions over these things, and we've seen the culture wars get more heated, right, in the last several years. And that has helped drive things, I think, all over the country here as well.
One person who you mentioned was Sarah Fabiano. Could you talk a little bit about her, who she is, where she was working, and what she's been experiencing?
She was at the North Thurston School District, down here by Olympia. And she helped be an advisor for the Black Student Union there. So there's an example of something that gets controversial when we're talking about gender and we're talking about race. She was advising the Black Student Union. They got Zoom bombed a year or two ago with sort of people saying racial slurs, things like that. And she moved school districts, not because of that, but, she moved to another school district here. And she received an email from a group of concerned parents here. They'd tracked her down, they'd found her contact information, they knew her prior work history and stuff, and said, hey, we saw you switch jobs to a new job. Is that part of any scandal or controversy? Do you have any connection with some of the activities in this new school district? We'd like to know. So for Sarah Fabiano, she said that was, the first time in her career that she sort of felt kind of targeted, right? That's stuff that in prior years may have gone to, you'd bring your concerns up at the school board or with your state lawmaker, but now there's people sort of targeting individual teachers, saying, hey, we're keeping an eye on you. That's sort of how she felt when she saw that.
And so this is an instance where she led the Black Student Union group at another school district, transferred, and because of that connection, unrelated to anything she was doing in the new school district, she was sought out and questioned by members of the community.
Yeah, that was her impression, yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the group that you referenced?
It's just sort of a group of concerned parents. They supported some school board candidates here this year in Olympia, and they've sort of brought to public attention things that make them uncomfortable. There was a student resource group for students of color, and they weren't going to let white students in, which is actually technically, for discrimination laws, you can't actually do that. So the school had to backpedal on that, and this group sees something like that, and they say, well, that's not following the law. So they've been pretty organized, and they've got a Facebook group, and they sort of they let people know, like, hey, there's a school board meeting, here, you should come and show up.
And you had mentioned, looking at the story, the groups made a concerted effort against teachers around their treatment of race and gender, including by sending targeted emails. What are they saying in these emails? What kind of messages are teachers receiving?
So this is the group's called the OSD Fairness Alliance for Olympia School District. So the email reads, Dear Ms. Fabiano, we'd like to introduce ourselves. We are the OSD Fairness Alliance. We are familiar with the controversy surrounding you when you were employed at North Thurston High and your hasty departure, prompting you to take on a lesser paid classified role at the Olympia School District. When we learned that BIPOC groups were starting at this new school district, we wondered about your role with this group. Have you been involved with the formation, planning, or operation of this group? If so, we'd like to know more about your role with the BIPOC group. Perhaps you can help us understand the purpose and activities of this group, how it came to be, and who or who may not be included. Thank you for your time. Cordially, OSD Fairness Alliance.
Is it just any kind of conversation around race and gender that feels potentially threatening or dangerous?
It's hard to know, right? It's hard to know, motivations and stuff. But, I mean, sort of the things that you're seeing bubble up at the national level, sort of with the culture, wars, Black Lives Matter month has come up for some groups and some people saying, we shouldn't be teaching that. Again, Pride Month even has had pushback. So it's sort of, all different things.
And it seems like a lot of these groups, a lot of this pushback is from parents, but you also mentioned an instance where students were protesting.
Yeah, they had in June, so Pride Month, there were some students at a school there in Kitsap Central School District wear shirts saying, there are only two genders. And so, there's an example of something that students wear the shirts, other students get upset or concerned, and the school board wound up commissioning an independent review of that incident. Of course, there's no legal basis to stop somebody from wearing a shirt like that, but it's sort of an example of sort of how deep divisions are getting over LGBT issues and issues of race and gender in general.
Who's most vulnerable in these situations, or who's most likely to be targeted? Is it primarily teachers, union members, board members? Is there kind of a particular group within the education system who's facing a lot of the backlash from parents?
I would say wherever the backlash exists, right, it's sort of touching everyone. But, there's studies saying that teachers are feeling pressure. There was a research report by the nonprofit, nonpartisan RAND Corporation that discussed, it was they've got survey material on teachers all over the nation, and in states where teaching was restricted, there were questions there and some pressures there among teachers, but teachers also said that they feel a lot of pressure from parents and people in the community over these issues, and that's been negatively affecting them.
When they're hearing about these grievances from parents and members of the community, are these things that are coming in primarily to their inboxes, on Facebook, or in these school board meetings? What are some of the ways that they're being accessed?
Well, I think, obviously at the school board meetings, you have the public comment when students are showing up in schools. There's sort of direct interactions. In the case of Sarah Fabiano, she got the email to her professional email address, right, her teacher email address. So it's all sorts of ways. It goes into sort of more civic ways, too, where people are running for a school board, for example, because they have concerns. And there was a group trying to get signatures on the ballot for a referendum this fall to roll back a law that seeks to protect transgender youth. And there was it didn't gather enough signatures to qualify for the ballot. But sort of when you look, sort of these efforts are sort of bubbling up all over.
I was going to ask about that because it looks like Nancy Kadams is running for re-election this year for school board. And when you were talking to her about some of these pushbacks against what's happening in the schools, did she bring up her election or re-election or any concerns that she has about being impacted?
No, she didn't sound too concerned. I mean, she and other people say that this isn't necessarily a huge segment of society. It's sort of a narrower group of people that have concerns. And we have a little bit of, when you always look to elections, right, as a way to sort of, as a gut check on what people support. So when we think about this referendum I just talked about didn't qualify for the ballot. A few years ago, there was an effort to put an initiative on the ballot to put restrictions on where transgender people, bathroom laws and stuff. That didn't qualify for the ballot. In 2020, 58% of Washington voters approved a comprehensive sex education law in a ballot referendum. So that's sort of one indicator. Is this really catching on with a wider group of society? And by those metrics, it hasn't. So Nancy Kadams and others says this, more sort of a narrow group of people that are really hammering on these issues.
In thinking about some of the educators and members of the education system who are getting pushback from the public, are they feeling protected by the schools? Do they feel safe when they're hearing these sorts of comments and this sort of hostility from members of the public?
The people involved acknowledge that, these groups are, they're not threatening violence. They're not, they're being respectful in their dialogue, but the educators say, it has an impact on them.
Did you get a sense that anyone's concerned about the education that students are receiving as a result of some of these conversations, or is anyone worried about how students are being impacted in the middle of all of this?
Well, I think that's a matter of opinion, right? If for the people who are protesting things like Pride Month and Black Lives Matter Month, they have their own set of concerns about their students. And then when you talk to, teachers, for example, like Sarah Fabiano, say, well, we're just trying to teach in a more inclusive way that recognizes that, there are many different types of people in the world, and many different types of family configurations, and those teachings are designed to make people feel like they see themselves reflected in these things. And so everybody sort of has a stake, right, in what's going to be taught to children. In the case of Sarah Fabiano, she said that, it's sort of now a consideration, like when she thinks about another job, she's going to think, well, is it worth it? Any career is difficult, and educators face their own sort of pressures for burnout, and there's been, teacher shortages for years. And so she said, that's something she's going to factor when she thinks about future work. We have this sort of broader national culture war that's fueling some of these divisions. We'll have probably a very heated presidential campaign next year, and people will be getting amped up about that. And we've seen that. We've seen variously, when you look at numbers, we've seen rise in anti-Semitic instances. State data shows that there's been a rise in hate crime against people focused on their gender and their gender identity. So, for example, I think it was 2013, the first year they started tracking that specific figure. There was one hate crime in Washington State, and now we're nearing 50, I believe. These groups that we're talking about in the story they're not threatening people. They're not, they're not calling for violence or anything. But it's just another indicator that there's sort of this rising tide of, in some cases, maybe it's concern. In some cases, maybe it's intolerance. These things are all sort of moving in a direction.
Did anyone you spoke to indicate any potential solutions that they see for this issue? Any potential ways that they can help people see eye to eye or sort of close that division a little bit?
I think people are wondering about that. And I think everybody just thinks that, things are probably going to stay sort of elevated. Temperatures are going to probably stay a little high through next year. So I don't think anybody sees sort of a short-term solution or a short-term way to figure things out.
What are the long-term implications of these sort of confrontations, conflicts? What does that mean for teachers in Washington and educators in Washington?
They'll probably have to keep, this in mind, that this is, this sort of roiling thing in our culture is going on, and it might be with us for a little while, and they'll have to just sort of take it into account in their jobs and their lives.
Thanks for listening to Crosscut Reports. This episode was reported by Joseph O'Sullivan. It was produced by Scott Michael and me, Maleeha Syed. The story editor and executive producer was Sarah Menzies. You can subscribe to Crosscut Reports wherever you listen, and whatever platform you're listening on, please review us. We'd love to know what you think of the show. Also, if you would like to support the work we do at Crosscut, whether it's our lineup of podcasts, the video docuseries we stream every week, or the in-depth reporting we deliver every day, go to crosscut.com/membership. In addition to supporting our journalism, members receive complete access to the on-demand programming of Seattle's PBS station, KCTS 9. For the latest political, environmental, and culture news from the Pacific Northwest, visit crosscut.com. That's also where you'll find a text version of the story we discussed today. Crosscut Reports is a product of Cascade Public Media. I'm Maleeha Syed. We'll be back soon with another episode.